Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see this gathering of some love here for this theater. So I welcome you all here. For those who don't know, my name is Brian Mattiello, and I'm chairman of the board here at the Warner Theater. So, okay. Thank you all for being here and demonstrating what I've seen over the years I've been involved, such an affinity for this theater. And I really appreciate that. You know, I'm not on my face or that Instabook stuff, but people were sending me some thoughts, comments, and questions that were being posted. And many of those questions were familiar to me because so many people asked them. And frankly, I'm going to be honest with you, most of them I had asked myself. And so misinformation, I wanted to address. But for the most part, wherever what was said, I knew it was out of love for this place because that's what guided the board, has all the time that I've served, and certainly these last couple of years that have been very unusual and challenging for the theater. I want to just set the stage quickly. I'm going to bring some folks out to help answer the questions that you guys posed. But I want to set the stage by saying that, yes, things have changed for us, and we're going to spend some time talking about those changes, making them more understandable for people best we can. But I want to tell you what hasn't changed to start. And the first is that the past is always present here at the Warner Theater. I actually have been involved since the mid-'90s. One of the persons that's going to join us on stage showed me a picture that they found upstairs in the archives of me back. It was with Jim Fritsch, his daughter, Erin, my wife, myself, and it was circa 94, something like that, maybe, 93. I had a lot of hair, so it's like very interesting photo. Really puffy stuff that was popular during the 90s. But honestly, in all those years, the past is always present for me. You know, every chapter that has been written about the theater builds on the previous one, and those chapters are protected. They're part of our history. They inform our future for sure. I wanted to make that point perfectly clear. The second is our mission has been tweaked a couple of times since it was written back in 1982, more for modernization, clarity, but for the most part reads the same today as it did in 1982, that we're committed to local production, we're committed to national acts and bringing the best in arts and entertainment here, and that we're committed to finding these budding artists here and educating them and bringing out the best and most in them as artists. And the other thing that hasn't changed is ownership. This remains its own nonprofit, its own 501c3, its own board of directors making these decisions. Of the challenges that we're facing today, the one that really was clear and compelling for us was that to really face the kind of changing environment in the arts industry, we needed a partner. And so I have read with interest, mostly great comments about us partnering with the Bushnell. And I got to tell you, sitting here 10 months into this, it has exceeded my expectations. But we remain our own nonprofit. We have a board that makes the decisions. What we did was we said we need help. And the firepower and the know-how the Bushnell has is blended in here through a contract management agreement to help us. When we lost our last executive director, we had a choice to make as a board. Do we go back out to the market and try to pay as much as we can to attract the kind of talent that we want? Or is this the time where we start looking elsewhere for a partner, again, to help us with with the day-to-day management of this theater. And I think it's been a terrific decision. So let's talk a little bit about what changes have made, and then we're going to get to your questions and answer in more detail. I don't want to get ahead of this this forum that we have for you here tonight. Before I introduce these changes, I have been thinking about these, caring about these for a long time, but here's the best part. I didn't do it alone. And there are a few board members that are here tonight, my brothers and sisters, that many of us were meeting on the phone every Monday night while the theater was closed for 2 years, just making sure this place was taken care of, and as soon as we could reopen, that we were in a position to do that. I'll ask my fellow board members to stand here tonight. Ann, Lisa, I see, Ed and Travis. Laura's here, Paul Summers, Gary Arnold. Thank you. What's that? And Carol Marine. Yes, of course. I just had dinner with her. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Carol, thank you, guys. So let me just flip the page here real quick, and then I'm going to bring some folks up because I want to just the changes that have taken place. There's really 4 things that I want you to keep in mind. One, we were closed for 2 years. That hurts. It's more than a punch in the stomach to have your revenues shut off, to have your relationship with the community cut off like that. It was devastating for so many businesses and so many people, but arts and entertainment in particular got hit pretty hard. 2, inflation is not our friend, not your friend, I know that, but here, when we were, Lynn Gelomino, who I see in the audience tonight, and we spent so many hours with so many others just each year trying to make this place work, finding a way to make that happen. And we were eking out each year, right, at the margins. You add to it a pandemic and inflation, and what gets laid bare are some of our weaknesses, right? So we were at the margins. We can only take so much. When costs go up, it hurts. And in particular, artist fees and the cost of production has gone up. I could surprise you with some of the numbers. And for some who have been involved in the business before, you may recall, some of the costs. They have really gone up. And at a theater at the margins, that makes it difficult. The cultural habits, our demographics haven't changed. We are getting older here in Northwest Connecticut. Younger population is shrinking, and the cultural habits got disrupted, and people got used to Netflix, not coming to the theater. So it's coming back, but with those costs, you got to have people, coming back here and choosing to come to live theater as much as possible. And the last thing, the 4th thing that has changed for us that we have to take stock of is the competition has changed, guys. It's 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now are all different in terms of the landscape. What artists are expecting, what other venues are fighting for. More community theater is offered in this area than it was some time ago. So all these things are forces that we have to pay attention to. So that's my setting of the stage. You have questions. I'd like to get to those. And I'm going to ask that the 2 Bushnell emissaries that have come out here and have made such a great impression on staff, on the board, and on this community to come out. And it's Stephanie Fried and Patrick Langevin. These 2 rock stars are serving as co-executive director at the Warner, and I bring their stuff here every day. I know they're easy to follow. You're gonna understand exactly what their mission is here every day, what they're bringing to this, and I'm so happy that they're here tonight. We also thought that the best way for this forum to be run was to have a moderator. I'm going to stay up here with these guys. You're going to hear their voices the most, but I want to offer a board perspective. But we're joined this evening to help moderate by Brad Drazen. And Brad, you may be familiar with, he was former reporter and anchor at NBC News. He's currently serving as Vice President for Communications at Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. I met Brad 20-something years ago. He interviewed me on camera. I was involved in supporting the 9/11 families, and we were on our way to New York City, taking the Connecticut families that were affected by by that tragedy and all the losses that they were facing, and we were getting them to their first anniversary, marking the first anniversary of 9/11, and he came down to meet the families, and he interviewed me, and I knew right then it was more than just a talented reporter. He was very humanistic in his approach, and so I think that makes him perfect for this evening. So, Brad, please come out and join us. And I will turn everything over to you, Brad.
Wow. Thank you so much, Brian. It's so great to see everybody tonight. It's really good to be in Torrington. Since my time as turning in my microphone, so to speak, as a reporter, I don't find myself up in this neck of the woods as much as I used to. And I had some nostalgia driving up Route 4 and winding through and saying, I remember that and I remember that. So I'm going to make this more of a habit going forward. It's great to see so many faces here. I'm not the least bit surprised. I understand, having lived here for a long time, lived in Connecticut for 25 years, and having traveled the state, I understand what institutions like the Warner Theater mean to communities like Torrington, and I understand about this institution what it means to you, having been a patron of the Warner and seeing some of the wonderful work that has happened here and the beautiful space, etc. So I was really pleased to be asked. I'm glad to be reunited with Brian as well tonight. And so I just wanted to point out that I was given an uncountable number of cards that have your questions on them. So we have a lot to get to tonight. I think you're going to find this really, really helpful and informative. And I think we should just go for it. So it's really important, I think, for you to really get to know these two folks up here a little bit, and about their passion for what the Warner Theater stands for and for what the arts stand for. So we're going to do a little bit of getting to know them before we get to your questions. So Stephanie, hi Stephanie.
Hi Brad.
Along with her role as co-executive director here at the Warner, she is chief operating officer at the Bushnell, where she has been since 2008. My math isn't great, but that's officially a long time.
Officially a long time.
Right. Okay, so prior to the Bushnell, Stephanie worked at the University of South Florida in Tampa, where she received both of her degrees, a BA in theater arts and an MBA. So, how many people move from Florida to Connecticut in this room? At least one. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I have 2 kids. Actually, I have 4 kids, but I have 2 that I made. And those 2, my youngest was about 3 months old, and my oldest was starting kindergarten. And I remember getting the syllabus for kindergarten and seeing that as of I believe it was second grade, there was no longer arts as part of his curriculum. And that troubled me. I have a background in theater, I have a background in the arts, full stop. It's in my blood, it's in my family. And it just happened. It was a July day. It was very hot, Tampa. And this job posting came across my desk on a listserv that I was on for the Bushnell. I didn't know the Bushnell. It sounded familiar. That's another story. But I didn't know it. So I went on the website, and I looked and saw all the things that were happening in schools with arts and education, using the arts to teach teachers how to teach core curriculum differently, not simply art for art's sake, which is important. Art for art's sake is super important, but also using those strategies for a child who may learn differently, or to just enhance learning for children who learn in traditional ways. Anyway, I applied for the job. Nobody called me for like 3 months. It was a very long 3 months, and I thought, well, I guess I'm not supposed to move to Connecticut. Anyway, they eventually called. And I interviewed, and I made the choice to move my family from Tampa to Connecticut. I commuted from Tampa for 6 months. I don't recommend that. I don't. It was, I had a 9-month-old. I had 1 week in Connecticut, 2 weeks in Tampa, 1 week in Connecticut, 2 weeks in Tampa. It was amazing. The weeks I was here, I didn't cut anyone's food. I didn't have to make formula. I didn't have to change diapers, and I didn't have to make my bed. Those weeks were good stuff, right? But the excitement was really getting to do the work and getting to learn about the arts landscape in Connecticut. That was phenomenal. It's not just the Bushnell. It is the entire state. We are so lucky to live in this state where there are exciting things like what happens here at the Warner and what happens at venues across the state.
Great. I like that. I haven't heard that story before. Talk a little bit about your theater education. You talked about education being a big reason why you came here. Talk about yours specifically, if you would.
So Mr. Grove was my high school drama teacher, and he lit up every room he walked into, and he did that because he made you feel special. He made you feel like you were capable of doing anything. So I left high school believing I was capable of doing anything. That's youth and Mr. Grove. And I went to the University of South Florida. I got my Bachelor of Arts in Theater Arts, and I specifically focused on stage management. I wanted to be a performer. I was not meant for that life. So, but I loved it. I loved every single aspect of the theater. I took classes in stagecraft and lighting design and costume design, and I took scene study, and I loved it. I think it made me a better person because I could understand the world differently. I could think about the world differently because of that training. So I got a degree in theater arts. I went and worked at the Berkshire Theater Festival in Massachusetts, in Stockbridge. Some of you might be familiar. I was there for 2 summers. My first summer, I was an intern. Then I was a PA the next summer. And then I went and worked professionally at Center Stage in Baltimore in a stage management role. And then I decided that while the life of a theater artist is exciting, I really dig consistency and stability. And so I thought, I've got to find a different way to do this work. And so I went back to USF. I got my MBA, and I started down a path there, which brought me then to the Bushnell, where I got to marry those 2 things that I love so much. And now being here in Torrington, which at the Warner, which is a different place than the Bushnell, and we'll talk more about that later for sure. I know everyone in this room knows that already. It's a different place. It fills something else inside of me, and I feel so lucky to be now here where I get to marry those 2 things together that I love so much. The work I do, related to my MBA, and the work I get to do related to theater.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Patrick, let's chat about you a little bit. Sure. So you've been with the Bushnell since 2016. You are currently Vice President of Programming in addition to your role here at the Warner. So you are from Connecticut. You went to the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts, Farmington High School. You went to University of Hartford. You've barely left this footprint.
Hey, I left for a long time.
No, we're getting to that. So you moved to New York City and started working for United Scenic Artists as a union representative. So obviously there's a common thread of the arts, and particularly theater, being, lighting those lights very early on in your life. What was the moment where you decided that this was going to be your life, that this was a career that you could pursue? Do you remember that?
I do. I always had such a passion for theater and the arts. I was always performing for my family as a child, and then going to a performing arts high school, that really sort of triggered my interest in realizing that, this could be a profession, and outside of acting, that there were other opportunities within the entertainment industry in which I could work and find a professional career. I think that it really wasn't until I moved to New York City and started running art therapy programs for kids and parents sometimes as well through an organization called Free Arts NYC. And through that program, I really could see this direct correlation between the arts and the impact that it could have on individuals and especially children in terms of, helping to build self-confidence, learning in different ways. And so for me, that was this trigger of how much I truly loved not only the arts, but also theater and the way that it could impact individuals and community as well.
Wonderful. Let's talk about kind of I embrace the idea that you've spent a lot of time in this part of the world. That wasn't a criticism. When you heard about this partnership between the Warner and the Bushnell, you obviously, growing up literally just a few towns away, were very familiar with the Warner Theater. What went through your mind that these two kind of worlds might collide?
Initially, it was, wait, what are we doing? But then very quickly, you know, Stephanie and I were really immersed in this community and embraced by the Warner board and the community. And there was so much to learn. And for me, I always had a perspective of the Warner as a community member growing up in Unionville, coming to see shows here. I had many friends who were in productions at the Warner over the years. So to all of a sudden, as an adult, many years later, a few years later, just a few, to come back as an adult and have this opportunity to play a role in supporting the Warner and helping the Warner grow, stabilize itself, and to ensure that the Warner's here for many years to come. So that's been really exciting for Stephanie and I in working on this project, but especially on a personal level of having grown up in this community, knowing that I can truly, there is value to what I can offer and what I can bring to the Warner to support the organization.
That wasn't my question, but I'm just going to add something. I think that you talked about being embraced by the community, by our amazing board, but by the staff.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Here at the Warner, you guys, if you don't know them, get to know them.
Yay.
They're amazing. And they have opened themselves up. They have said, how can we help? What do you need? We're in with you. Man, you can't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah, it's, you know, obviously this has been a process, and the whole entire team has come along with us. There have been some challenging periods of time, but we've grown as a community and as a family and as a team.
Wonderful. All right, so we are going to get to a long list of questions submitted by you and members of the community. The topics include leadership, programming, education, the Warner Stage Company, and the overall patron experience in no particular order. And there are questions that fall under all of those categories. So let's start with some questions about leadership. People here and in the community are curious about who is running the Warner now. You got a sense of, Brian talked about his experience on the board, the two of you about how you come to it. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about your roles over the last 10 months and the roles you're playing here in Torrington?
Yeah, why don't I kick it off and then you guys hop in. So as Brian mentioned, we entered into this memorandum of understanding between our two organizations August 1st. That memorandum outlined that Patrick and I would take responsibility for principal leadership. So specifically meaning, instead of hiring an executive director, Patrick and Stephanie are going to function in that role. In that time, we also did the assessment and the work we needed to do in support of the board's expectations for us. But so we have been acting as that principal leadership in partnership with the staff. The staff retained their roles, we were learning from them, et cetera. We as executive directors, co-executive directors, report to the board. Patrick and I also have the pleasure of reporting to the CEO of the Bushnell and the Bushnell board. We report to a lot of people. But for Warner work, we report to the Warner board. They give us their feedback, they advise, they counsel, and fundamentally they make the decisions of a move forward, those sort of big projects. But we're responsible for day-to-day management of the organization.
Great. We've established this. I think we all agree that this is a special place, right? And there were several questions submitted with the same theme, wondering if the Warner will retain its unique identity both as a producing and presenting organization, or if it will become more like the Bushnell as exclusively presenting shows.
Yeah, so we really want to make sure that the Warner maintains its identity and its brand. That is at the core what the community loves about the Warner. In terms of producing and presenting, of course, we want to continue to produce. Things will look different, and we'll go in more depth talking about producing and presenting as well. We really want to look at what's working, what's not working, and sort of develop new content both on the producing side and the presenting side to help lift this organization up, to drive patronage, bring in new audience members, bring in new and diverse audiences, in addition to the people who have been a part of our Warner family for a very long time. So that is really the hope in terms of building the content that's going to be coming to our stages.
This place is magic. The building is magic. That theater, when you walk in and you see the star, it's magic. It couldn't be anything other than the Warner. The idea that it would ever look like the Bushnell, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Torrington. It doesn't make sense for the Warner. It doesn't make sense for the Bushnell. The Warner is the Warner, and the Warner needs to retain its unique identity, and we're committed to that. It's in the business plan we shared with the board. It's super important, and it's key to the work we're doing.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, and we understand, and we've learned a lot, in the last 10 months, about the relationship that the community has to this organization. So for us, we understand the concern, and we've heard those concerns, and we do, we're reiterating that tonight. It's the Warner is the Warner, and that's truly what we want to exist going forward, is always that Warner brand.
Brad, I just want to add that was the spirit, the entire conversation that we've had with the Bushnell from the very beginning. It was very easy for us to just go out with a request for proposal, to have any partner come. We knew we needed someone familiar, just down 44, someone who had a little more resources than us, a little, as I said earlier, firepower, know-how, but that was going to come in and appreciate our history. And I also mentioned that our mission hasn't changed. The board is very committed to it. There are realities that you adjust to, and sometimes harsh ones. You just have to ebb and flow with how that mission looks from time to time, but always wanting to get back to its fullness as quickly as possible. And so that's what we're doing every day, figuring that out.
That's great. I'm going to go to a question. It was submitted anonymously, but the phrasing is really important, so I'm going to actually read the question verbatim. And it reads, would the people who saved this theater from the wrecking ball in the 1980s and then built the theater over the last 35 years be pleased with your vision?
So Patrick and I don't have the pleasure of necessarily knowing those individuals personally. That being said, I believe what they did was nothing short of a miracle. They saved this beautiful building. I've heard the stories of people chipping mold off the walls, cleaning seats, repairing every piece and part of this theater, people on the roof, people in the Star doing the work to refurbish the Star. They were doing that because they knew that the Warner was important, essential to Torrington, and they were bringing back this beautiful place for this community to ensure it would be here moving forward. That is the same spirit with which we're doing the work we're doing today. Patrick and my job is to work with this board to ensure that the Warner persists for another 100 years. We're almost 100. 2031 is our 100th birthday. Set your watches. We're going to have a party. But I hope I make it to 100 and I get a big party too. But so we are committed. Do I think that they necessarily would look, if we asked them in that time, what would you think about the Warner trying this new thing or doing this new thing? I don't know that it would resonate because times were so different. I mean, we're so different today, right? Like, who would have thought? Brad and I were having this conversation earlier today. It's amazing to me. I can entertain myself with the device I hold in my hand. That can keep my attention, and probably does far too often, for hours, right? it didn't look like that back then. So the Warner is evolving to be relevant in today, which looks different than 1986. But my hope is, yes, and my hope is that they know how grateful everyone in this room, everyone in our community, and Patrick and I individually are for what they did to ensure this gem is here today.
Wonderful, and it speaks to what you said, Brian, about the history. The history is embedded in an institution like this, and there's nothing that can change that, and it's really important. And that the people in the community, regardless of how old you are, appreciate that history, and you can tell from the tone of the way you're talking about it, the two of you appreciate it too, and I think that's why the partnership has such great potential. Let's talk about programming, okay? So, there's an old saying, as goes the Warner, so goes Torrington. So when the marquee is lit, downtown Torrington is busy, there's people, the streets are bustling, restaurants are busier, people just have pep in their step, right? So the big programming's a big part of this. What's playing? So before we dig into specific questions, Patrick, programming is your role at the Bushnell and kind of your stock and trade these days. So tell us about how you're thinking about the programming here specifically for this community.
Yeah, so we've had a great opportunity in terms of spending the last 10 months, or even prior to that, when Rufus was still here, and trying to understand the shows that were currently being booked out here at the Warner, and what was selling well, what the community was interested in. There were a lot of assessments that were done in terms of questioning the community for what they were looking for. In knowing how we book shows from a Bushnell perspective, we were able to provide a level of perspective because of our relationship to the state, our relationship to this organization as well. And so for the Bushnell, when we book our shows, we're working with, a lot of agents, so somewhere over 50 different agents from across the country and sometimes internationally as well. So when we're booking those shows, we're already, considering, okay, what's going to work in Hartford? And now we have that opportunity to think about, okay, as we're having these conversations with these agents, what can work for the Warner as well? And we're also building those relationships with those agents so they can understand who the Warner is, and they can begin to trust us as a theater that they're willing to take risks on, to really think about different shows that can come out here to the Warner.
I would offer, so Patrick sort of lives in the space of programming, production, producing, education. I live more in the operations space. Part of my responsibility to Patrick and his team is ensuring that the state of our building is one that promoters want, or agents want to bring their acts to. We have a beautiful front of house. I don't know that anyone can rival our beautiful front of house. Our dressing rooms are challenging. So it seems
That's
like
such a nice word, isn't it?
might understand what I'm saying. So they're not accessible. If you have a mobility challenge, you can't go to our dressing rooms in the basement under the beautiful O'Neillia stage. If you want to take a shower, that's too bad. We don't have one of those. There's a lot of challenge associated with that, and that's part of the work we're doing. We're working to secure funding so that we can create stage-level dressing rooms, so that we can make our offer, when Patrick and his team submit a solid offer, that we are the place they want to come. But there's work we have to do here that we're doing. We're on it. But it takes time, and it takes money, and we're working on that too. But it's key, having the right back of house to complement our beautiful front of house.
Yeah, and it's exciting to think about, with all the work that we're doing and now understanding structurally the things that we need to fix, and financially what the path forward is too, that, there is so much potential between these two gorgeous theaters, and getting these agents and different productions that can also be produced here as well to think about these two spaces to bring that content here to present to the community.
Brett, I just want to quickly add from a board perspective that we're trusting in this here. We have considered other theories, other options. When we were alone, we were finding our way. The board isn't programming the theater, but we buy tickets, we have opinions, we're connected to the community, we get feedback. We like to stay informed about what's going on, and since this is such an important revenue source for us, we have to pay attention. But we also realized that something different and more was being asked of us, and we've had to make some adjustments to rebuild this particular area, and all the changes that have happened externally in the industry, as well as what you heard about our limitations. This is a journey for us. What exists today, what we have planned for next year, is all based on this longer-term plan that we have for the theater, to return ourselves to not just financial wellness, but as I said earlier, to achieve that mission that we have in its fullness. We are trusting in this.
Great, thank you. Here's a great follow-on question that we got from a Warner patron and theater lover. Michael P. asks, why does the Warner Theater not have bigger and better acts? The majority of shows seem to be tribute bands or local theater. There's so many great musicians and bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, oldies, country, rock, hair metal. It does say that. Still touring small local venues, and the Warner is not one of them. I live 5 minutes away and find myself driving everywhere else for a fun show. So, back to the kind of big question from Michael, why does the Warner not have, in his words, bigger and better acts?
So first of all, it just pains me to hear he's going elsewhere. And we will bring Michael P. back, definitely. We'll get him to the Warner. So for us, similar to what we were just discussing, we have certain challenges, backstage, what we can offer in terms of dressing rooms, not having showers. So for a lot of the bigger acts, the bigger names, the challenges, those riders for those shows, even for us to make an offer on them, there are these specific requirements. And so sometimes off the bat, we can't even put in an offer because our, back of house does not fulfill the requirements. But outside of that, there are a lot of, artists, performances that we're looking at. We were just having this conversation earlier today. Our programming team submits, even just for the Warner in the last few months, it might be 30 different offers a month, and we might confirm 2 of those. And that's not always saying, that's not saying anything about the Warner. It's that we're also competing against Ridgefield Playhouse and the Oakdale, other venues around the state within our vicinity. But a lot of times it's just about proving to our connections, our producers, our agents, that we can sell a show. This is going to do well. Kevin James is a great example of that. The stand-up comedian who was here 2 weeks ago, and that was almost a sold-out show. And Torrington, those restaurants were packed. But it proved to that agent and also to that comedian that this is a great venue. We did exceptionally well because, of course, they're always thinking about the financials, too, of we made a lot of money here, and that will get passed on. That agent who represents 50 other comedians, now when they're planning out their route across the country, they'll think of us. So it will take time, but we're building those relationships. We're ensuring that these people who work in this industry understand who we are and that we are a power in this industry and that we can bring these bigger names and sell well here.
Great. You're on the spot again, though. Karen S. asks, will you bring more Broadway shows in, like in Hartford? Will the shows, this is a multi-part question, will the shows be affordable for families? And will you offer play reading or workshops for community residents?
Would love to do more play reading. That would be great. Wonderful idea. We're always looking at the price points for any of our shows to ensure people have access to attend any of our productions. Broadway. Oh, Broadway. How could I forget about Broadway? So the challenge with Broadway is just our depth of stage and the number of dressing rooms and not having showers. So in a dream world, we would love to be able to present some larger Broadway productions. There's always possibilities there. We've talked about some smaller productions that we can consider. There was we just had a recent conversation about a production of Forbidden Broadway to see if we can potentially make that work here. So always thinking about what different types of productions that we can bring to both these stages.
But we were fundamentally built, as everyone in this room knows, as a movie house, not a Broadway house. And even the Bushnell has had to, multiple times in its history, expand its stage to accommodate the ever-growing touring Broadway sets. They're huge. They're just massive. And they take far more space. This stage here is between a half and 2/3 the depth of the stage at the Bushnell, and the Bushnell is a small touring stage. Oftentimes shows have to not use different set pieces because they have to accommodate it on our stage.
Brad, I just to answer that question from a community theater perspective, though, because tour groups would have those limitations. We have done Broadway on our stage and very successfully over the years. Ticket sales were declining. And that's when we moved most of our productions here, and we've had some success here, but there is that memory for all of us of these beautiful.
You're talking about Broadway titles.
That's correct.
Yeah,
but being done by community theater.
And designed for that stage.
Exactly,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Karen asked another question about your thoughts around efforts for programming or acts to attract younger adults. What are the opportunities and what are the challenges with that?
Sure, yeah. So we're always trying to look to attract different demographics for shows here, both on the producing side and the presenting side. And even this summer, Roxy is here, director of School of Rock, which we're really excited about for this summer, which has a younger cast in it, and it's also a great title to bring a younger audience to, and also another production where it's an excellent price point for people who want to come see the show. It's not an expensive ticket. It's accessible for people. So we're excited about that. We'll talk about this a little bit on education side too, but we also have opportunities for younger patrons to come in and learn a little bit more about the theater as well.
Great. One more programming question, and it relates to presenting the Metropolitan Opera Series live streams.
Yep.
We still going with that?
So this is sad to announce, but so really understanding the financials of that program, we won't be able to move forward with it. It is an excellent program. We're so glad that we were able to participate in that program for the last few years. We had a very generous donor who helped us subsidize that program and allow us to continue it. But moving forward, in terms of being able to present the Met Opera, we won't be able to continue with it. But there are other opportunities for those people who enjoy opera that we will be presenting. So it'll look a little bit different.
I will say, too, it's particularly sad. We saw really amazing, and our director of marketing, Alex Page-Hiley, is here with us tonight. We saw attendance for those triple in this year, each one triple what they had been. Even with that tripling, it still doesn't make financial sense. So it's like, we're so pleased, right? We're so proud that it grew like it did, but it still wasn't financially working.
Okay, let's move on to education. You just mentioned education. We have several questions about that. So, clearly from your backgrounds that we heard about a little while ago, arts education, theater education is meaningful and part of your own lived experience, which is wonderful. I know from my experience, having lived in Greater Hartford for a long time, how robust the education programs are that the Bushnell offers, bringing people there, going out into communities of all different sizes. It really is a wonderful opportunity for the community, for the individuals who participate, but also for the community to embrace the arts in the next generation of performers and designers and stage managers and now marketers and things like that. So let's see. I know that I read all these questions, and there's a lot of lead-in to these questions. I don't want to read all this lead-in to these questions. I want to get to the questions. I also saw the video. Do the people in the audience know about the video?
I believe some folks know about a video we received. Yeah, I see you waving. Hi. So I think some folks know about it, but not everyone.
And I think that in any community that cares about the arts, the idea of not just sustaining the people for whom arts has been a part of their lives for X number of decades, but to really foster that love for the theater and the arts in a younger community is what an arts community is all about, is what a theatrical community is all about. And so the education here has been meaningful, and it was mentioned in that video that some of you are familiar with. So we'll talk more about some of that when we discuss the Warner Stage Company, which is another topic. But the arts and education programs through the Theater Center for Arts Education was established during the renovation in the early 2000s, 20 years ago. So now we're finally getting to a question after me fumbling over these cards. What is the vision for education at the Warner moving forward, particularly for Warner Center for Arts Education?
Sure. So, the Warner has such a long history with their impactful education programs that they've had over the years. And we've had the opportunity with the work that we've done, and even prior to coming in, the board had some work done with some assessments that were done by two separate companies who are nationally renowned and have experience in arts education. And so through those assessments and working with our education department at the Bushnell alongside the education department at the Warner, we've been able to really spend the last 10 months assessing the education department, determining what is working, what does our community need, what do the children in our schools, in the surrounding communities, in our community need. So with the skill set of Yolande Spears, who is our Senior Vice President of Education and Chief Community Officer, and Kristen Davis, who is our Director of Education, alongside Molly Wilson, who is in our Education Department here. They have been working incredibly hard over the last few months of really looking at our current programs and thinking about what's working and how these programs need to evolve, then looking at the results of those assessments and determining what the community needs and starting to flesh out those programs for the future of education at the Warner.
I would offer too, Patrick, one of the things I think that is part of Yolande's process and that I've always really admired about her, she's not deciding what Torrington needs. She's not deciding what this community needs. She's asking this community what they need. She's talking to teachers. She's talking to principals. She's talking to superintendents. She's finding out where those gaps are. How can we work to fill them? How can we work to be relevant and necessary and useful versus us just sitting back and saying, I think what they need is this, and doing it. I really respect that about her, and she just made a presentation to the board last week, and I'm so looking forward to what she's talking about rolling out.
Yeah, and the board presentation was very impressive. And one of the things that we could be most proud of is that we built a center, a place where, summer activity can happen, private lessons, ongoing, leading up to productions. So much can take place here that's very exciting, and it has over the years. Lots of reasons to stand behind it. But when you think about the Bushnell and how they have made themselves much more mobile, and they're in the community, and they're reaching people, not just those that want to spend money to become the artists that they can be, but just exposure to the arts. That isn't something we haven't built that capability. And so what I'm excited about for education as I look forward is maintaining our center, but also getting out and bringing arts to where people are, not just asking them to come to our center.
Yeah, it's a both and, right? It's talent development and arts and education. It's both.
Great. Thank you, Brian. That's a great point. Carly B. asks a two-part question. My children love the Warner Summer Program, and if it's in its previous iteration, the new model is not as appealing to them without the emphasis on acting and performance. It's also much harder for us to work with only a half-day option. We're working parents. Is the option of a full-day, primarily acting program something that may come back?
Yeah, and I'll just specify to provide a little bit of background. In terms of us making changes to the summer camp, really what had occurred was there were some state requirements that we were not able to adhere to for this summer, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing it the right way. So for this summer, we felt that there was an opportunity to do it a little bit differently. It wouldn't be a full day, but that we could bring in some nationally renowned master teaching artists that specialize and have experience working with children in puppetry, in collage, hip-hop dance, poetry, so different forms of art. So beyond just theater, so broader. So trying to attract children who may not be specifically interested in theater, but may have other interests in arts. And again, going back to my own personal experience with art therapy, providing those different opportunities really allows children to think about things differently and learn in new ways.
But this fall, on Yolan's presentation, there is a nice return to adding back in scene study, technical theater, those pieces in art. I forget what they call it. They have a really fun name for it. As you would
Art.
Fall what now? Thank you.
Fall
Factor.
Artsploration, fall factor.
Yes. So, and I think, for this summer, we needed to make sure that we were in alignment with the guidelines of the state. But we're hearing the feedback. We're hearing the feedback from the community, and we will work to continue to evolve to meet the needs that the community is identifying. But we also have to be in compliance with what the state requires when you call yourself a camp.
Got it. Here's a question submitted anonymously. Will you be bringing back more classes or opportunities for teens? It's much needed and missed greatly.
Yep, so what Stephanie was just saying, so we have our Artsploration Fall Factor, also with School of Rock this summer, another great opportunity, hands-on opportunity to be a part of a production, so we're really looking forward to that. And again, as we continue to develop our educational programming, we're continuing to look for those opportunities for children at any age level to participate.
Great. Thank you. I jumped ahead and I mentioned the video.
You just previewed it. That's
I
okay.
previewed.
It's like a trailer.
I previewed
it's like
it.
a trailer.
I didn't paint as clear of a picture as the two of you might. I watched the video that you shared with me, Stephanie, the other day, And it is an amazing story, the story of this community bringing this institution back to life from the grave, effectively. Really phenomenal, phenomenal. How many hands and how much passion was part of that. But the folks here don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you about kind of your impressions and how that plays into the way that you start your day when you show up here every day to reestablish this and perpetuate this place as the institution that it's been for so long.
That was a multi-part question, Brad.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the first part, which is, I think, my takeaway, and Patrick, you can share your thoughts too, right? I watched that video. I got it. It was, by the time I was able to look at it in my email, it was probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was sitting on the couch in my living room, and the house was quiet. And I watched it was on my laptop. I watched that screen light up with those images of, 1988 and Annie and Oklahoma. And I mean, there's so many productions, and I'm sure I'm messing all the titles up. Huge, huge productions. They were incredible. It was so beautiful. And the spirit of that video, the idea of the sandbox, the idea that at the Warner you can, take a pile of sand and turn it into a castle, turn it into whatever you want, because that's what we do in the theater. It was incredibly moving. Knowing that there's a group of people that are so passionate this far on, right? How long ago, this is sad to think about, how long ago was 1992? I graduated high school in 1992. No, I know, but there was some video from 1992. That hurts my soul a little bit that was as long ago as it was. But I look at those productions, and I'm amazed by them. And I think about myself, and Patrick, I know you do too. I'm trying to think the tone I want to put on this question, because it's important, but how was that possible? Like, it was remarkable. Cast and crews of over 100. Like, just remarkable. And I from the future, I applaud all of those folks, and I know a number of them are here in the room who did that and who made that possible. Today looks different, and I think, trying to take that spirit and see how that spirit can remain alive today in a way that is financially responsible for the Warner, so that we're able to be open, we're able to keep doing all the things we do, but that keeps the spirit of community, of volunteer theater. I mean, those productions didn't look very volunteer. They looked pretty incredible. So I was super moved by it. I was really grateful. Those of you in the room who participated, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. We come out here every day to try to continue to perpetuate the Warner. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments too. I feel that, we've had the opportunity to hear from so many community members in the time that we've been here, and hearing a lot of great stories about the productions that were produced here, and all of the people who took so much away from that sense of community, that sense of family, and for that generation who also took so much away. They learned so much that some of them now work in the entertainment industry.
Dan Russo.
But to have that video of this visual representation of that storyline, of the history of the organization, was really powerful for both of us. And it's great for us to understand that history in more depth. We understand the passion that people have for Warner Stage Company, the love that they have for the history and what was created all of those years together. I did community theater for many years, or most of my adolescent life, and through college as well too. So I understand that. So there's that personal connection and that love, and we see that, And we want to ensure that that still exists, that it might look a little bit different in the future, but that idea of creating something together as a community, as a group of people who love theater is important to us, and we want that to still exist here.
Yeah, bro, I can't resist, right? So, listen, 1982, I was 15 years old, and my wife, that iconic picture of the people in the front saying, no, it's not going to be a parking lot, we're here. My wife's in that picture. She had danced in the opening program, Capelia, she danced in. But I remember even before that, guys, right? My first kiss was here with Lynn Marquis. I remember it well.
Brian, TMI.
Yeah, it was mushy, Brett. But listen, I just want to make this point that none of that is lost on us. If there's a feeling that there's any indifference among any current board member or any decision that we've made or the staff, please ask us, because it's not true. These decisions that we've had to make about curtailing certain programming and building towards the future have been difficult decisions for everyone. But in no way, if there is change, in no way is it abandonment. And we do trust in our plan to rebuild, reimagine what it is that we can do here that is financially viable, but also honors our mission in finding that right balance.
Yeah, I would say it's actually, in my mind, the opposite of abandonment. We want to make sure that we're here and able to do that kind of work, like I said before, for another 100 years. It is ensuring that we build a model that works and that we can persist with in this new landscape, both financial landscape, interest landscape, what our communities are looking for, but it's about making sure it's still here.
We owe that to ourselves and then everyone who is part of this history. We owe that. Yeah.
So, speaking of that passion, that community passion, about 25% of the questions that were submitted were about the Warner Stage Company. Many of the questions had similar themes, so we kind of grouped them and paraphrased them into categories. So there are several that we're going to get to right now. So Eric L. was somebody who asked a similar question to others. The role of the stage company has shifted significantly over the past few years. We were referring to that. With the announcement that the Warner will only be putting on 2 stage company productions a year, some people are concerned that it's somehow going to be phased out in some way. You addressed that as you were talking about the video, and Brian said that couldn't be farther from the truth. Is there more to say about that? I mean, I think you addressed, all three of you addressed that from your own personal experience and what your intentions are.
Yeah, and I would say, that I understand that fear because people hold Warner Stage Company and the Warner so close. And we're appreciative that people have the relationship to the organization and Warner Stage Company too. So I think we both understand that fear and that anxiety about Warner Stage going away. And that is not our plan by any means. We understand the value of this program and we see a path forward. But understanding the financials of the organization as a whole and understanding the financials of Warner Stage Company, we have to take a step back. We have to look at things as a whole organizationally, but also with this program. How can we make this work so to ensure that there is a long-term future and plan for Warner Stage Company?
And 2 is not a magic number, right? 2 was what we felt like we needed to do this year to give ourselves some space to do the analysis, to look at what's possible. But it's not magic. It's not like 2 so that it can then be 0. It's 2 so that we can then figure out what's next. And I know, Patrick, you've talked about, and your team has talked about, opportunities to create other types of community-based arts projects, that maybe it's not, a big Broadway style show, maybe it's something different. I mean, play readings, come on now. I mean, that, how is that part of that, right? That it's not, again, it's not just play readings. We're still talking about doing these Broadway style shows, but how do we figure it out so there's a whole package there, and again, it's financially sustainable?
And we want to hear from the community too of what are people looking for, whether that's Warner Stage Company, a Broadway title, or it is a show that you saw many years ago, but you think it would work well in this very theater. So we're always open to those ideas, so please bring them forward. And even if it's outside of that, we're producing an immersive experience in this theater in 2 weeks, which we're incredibly excited to share with the community, Lumeria. So it is an immersive arts experience where there is transparent fabric that will be hanging down from the catwalk in this theater, in which you can explore, you can walk through the space, and you will see projections that are flowing through the fabric. So you're seeing these images and dancers on the fabric as you're walking through. But at different periods of time throughout the weekend, there are different opportunities to engage with different demographics. So on Friday night, with Lumeria, we have a happy hour. There will be live music on that Friday evening. Saturday morning, within that same space, we have yoga. Then we have a dance class. Then you can just come and explore, so you can create your own sort of adventure through the space. And then on Sunday, we have more of a family experience. So there's going to be a large-scale puppet and arts and crafts experiences. So it's a different opportunity for us to produce something that is still entertainment for our community, but tapping into a lot of different demographics.
Great. Nick M. is asking a very, very specific question about the future of the community theater here in Torrington. Will there be shows every fall, winter, or spring and summer? And will you give aspiring actors more opportunities? I mean, you got to give them credit for cutting right to the chase.
Yeah. Well, we're always looking for opportunities for young aspiring audiences. So again, School of Rock, and this summer, a lot of young, talented performers. We just had auditions last week and had an incredible response. So that is going to be just a wonderful opportunity this summer for those children, both who are a part of the production, but then who come as well. And as Stephanie and I were just discussing too, right now we're looking at 2 productions. So in the fall, we have Dracula, which will be directed by our former artistic director, Dick Terhune, who will be returning for that production. And then we have a to-be-determined production in the spring. So that's what we have on the calendar for right now. But in terms of, summer, fall, winter, and spring, it's all evolving. If the right title comes up, the right project, if we can make it work financially, then we will certainly do that.
Just quickly, there's something I think that's really cool that's related to School of Rock, and Roxy's here. Can you tell folks about the production manager that's joining?
Oh, yeah. This is so exciting. So Charlene Speyer, who so Charlene had worked with us at the Bushnell coming out of COVID. Incredibly talented individual who was actually a stage manager on the Broadway production of School of Rock. So she is coming in to be our production manager for this summer's production. So we're really excited to have her experience and expertise working with incredible team that we have here. So super excited about that.
She lives in Canton?
She does, yeah. She lives locally.
Amazing. Susie H. asks a question that I suspect a bunch of people in the audience are wondering about. Is there a possibility that there would be at least one main stage production a year, potentially in the summer. And she goes on to ask a similar question to Nick's question about kind of year-round for community productions seasonally with at least one on the main stage.
So, prior to us coming in, Rufus and the board had spent some time really looking at main stage productions. And Brian was talking about inflation earlier. It is incredibly expensive to put those productions on the main stage. There's just a different financial structure when we're doing it in here versus the main stage. In addition, when we put a production on the main stage, when you're thinking about taking that theater offline for essentially weeks at a time leading up in terms of rehearsals and tech, that takes away the opportunity for us to book larger shows on the main stage that could drive a lot of revenue. So that's something that we really need to consider. But putting a production on the main stage isn't off the table. I think if there was the right title, if the financial structure worked out, would love to do that.
Is it true? I don't negotiate this stuff, so I don't actually know the answer here. Is it true that when you license a show, like if you're licensing a show for this space with 275 seats, that is a different price than 1,770 seats?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone here knows, all the community theater people.
So does that change? I mean, this is a stupid question because I know the answer is yes, but like that changes then the financial model to make that show break even or profitable?
Yeah, absolutely. And even in doing it in the main stage, sure, we would love for that house to be sold out. But realistically, looking at the sales from previous years for things that were on the main stage, they did well. But when you're paying for the number of seats and then, even if you have 600 people in the audience, it's still a challenge financially.
Susie H. has another question.
I think Susie H. might be here.
Really?
I hear
Will the
Susie H.
real
public.
Susie H. please? Never mind. Okay. Speaking to the financial challenges that you just referenced, so to help with the finances, would it be conceivable to have a dedicated fundraising committee just for the community theater? Could you hold an event where a portion of the ticket sales could support the Warner Stage Company, or do other outreach for sponsors?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept. I mean, we talked with the board about, is there a world in which it makes sense for Warner Stage Company to kind of be its own entity, almost? Do I think there's a world where those ideas could work and could be useful? Absolutely. I though want to offer that we have exactly 2 people working in development, and they're responsible for about 50% of our operating revenue. So that equates to roughly $1.2 million that they're raising to make sure we're open. So finding the time and the ability and cultivating volunteers to help do that work with us. We have amazing volunteers here at the Warner. I see some volunteers here in the house. Woo. So amazing group of people. So thank you, all of you. But we have volunteers who also serve on committees, like our gala committee and our fundraising event committees, like the wine tasting or Yacht Rock. It's a lot of work. And right now, our focus is on making sure we are overall financially stable so that then we can explore those ideas. I think they're great ideas. It's just being able to staff it and support it so it can be successful.
Yeah, Brad, the board's aligned with that thinking, right? So financial stabilization. We're all, every theater struggling right now, coming out of, evolving from COVID, trying to figure out. Some had endowments they could rely on and go through these years where losses are likely. Some theaters have actually closed, that's not our intention here. We're doing everything we can to work through this and stick with our long-term plan. We do have physical plant needs, though. We are now in our 20th year since we've renovated this place. Things go. We've got to make that a priority, absolutely. The growth needs that we spoke about, if we're going to be competitive with our programming going forward, there are some physical plant needs that are not just replacements, they're actually renovations to improve the place here. And then all of this, the fundraising aspect, I do like that question. We got to always be mindful of our ticket prices, making sure that there's an entry point for what's half of our ticket sales are right here in Torrington. So adding these fees on top of ticket price, you always have to be mindful of that. But the spirit behind the question is getting us back, right? And the long-term plan. This next year, the following year, are tricky years for us. We're going to figure it out. The board is committed. Our partnership puts us in a position of strength. I'm actually very optimistic, but our fundraising priorities have to go to this physical plant need and getting us through these cash-tight years that are ahead of us.
Thanks, Brian. All right, we have some questions about the patron experience, about safety and security, outside and inside, as well as long lines at the bar. Who asked that question?
Everybody did.
And concessions pricing. So let's start with Tim A's question related to parking and crossing streets to come into the theater. So, do you know if anyone from the Warner has ever reached out to the city or DOT, good luck getting DOT to respond, to ask if it's possible to time the lights for a safer crossing of East Main Street? That's part one. He goes on to say, the city has invested in new parking payment systems around the Warner and local businesses. Why are they not able to do a 2 or 3 hour free parking around downtown? It's a city question, but we thought you might know with the Warner and downtown growth so intertwined. So, complicated questions. What are the answers?
Well, so have we talked to the city? Yes, absolutely we have. Mayor Carbone has been open and available for the questions that I've had as we've grown to learn more about this fantastic place. A specific answer, what was his name again?
Tim.
Tim's question. This is fascinating to me, and it seems fortuitous that it came at this time. So the city has received a grant to do a study to check the timing of that light, those series of lights at that intersection, and there's a study that's been executed. So this is not my work, y'all. I'm just remembering what I've been told. There's a study that's been executed or is being executed, and they're looking at installing things. It's like a little piece of equipment that then says, oh, hey, there's someone in the crosswalk. Don't go to green yet. That extends that time, because I think, and this is no laughing matter, right? I think oftentimes our patrons are trying to cross and they find themselves in conflict with a vehicle, and we don't want that. Nobody wants that. We want it to be a very safe place. But so I know the city is doing some of that work there. Related to the free parking, I know there are times when that does happen. For instance, with our school buses, when we have daytime performances for kids, which that is one of my favorite sights in the whole wide world, is seeing school buses lined up out in front of the Warner. It's just the best thing. But our school buses are able to line the streets without paying for parking. I know in Hartford, and I have to learn more about here in Torrington, I know in Hartford when we at the Bushnell take parking offline of Capitol Avenue, we have to pay the city to do that. It's a daily rate per space. It's not inexpensive. So I need to look into knowing more about that, but I suspect that much like Hartford, it's a revenue generator for the city.
I mean, right now we just give people advice. You know, we tell them where the parking options are, including the parkade. It's imperfect, but it is what it is, right? It's our footprint. Obviously, a conversation about a parking garage at some point, which is very expensive proposition up front, would provide a lot of answers for downtown, and I know there's been ongoing conversations about that.
All right, we're moving inside the theater now. Carly C. asked a multi-part question about bag searches, long lines at concessions, whether or not vaccines will be required for attendance in the future, how to address patrons who are misbehaving during shows, and last but not least, what can you tell us, this audience, about plans for how patrons experience the front of house at the Warner moving forward, and what efforts are you taking related to ensuring an enjoyable experience within the two spaces?
So I think the last part of that question is actually the question. We can talk about the details, and I will, but it is about how can I come to the Warner and have the Warner experience? And that when I think about the Warner experience, I think about I was able to get a beverage, whatever my beverage choice is, easily. I was able to park easily. I was able to make my way into the theater easily. I feel safe when I come here. I feel seen when I come here. I feel like those around me are having a similar experience, and we are doing this together, not in opposition to one another. That's what she's trying to get to, right? So what we recognize is that we have wonderful bartenders here at the Warner. We have not yet quite been able to give them the setups that they need to be able to be as effective as they can possibly be. We're working on that. Charlie Myers, who's the Senior Director of Event and Patron Services at the Bushnell, is now engaging here at the Warner, working with Lisa Soliani and the front of house volunteer and bartender teams to figure out best placements for bars. Some of our bars, I don't know if this is just specific to me, but I'm 5'2". I could not serve a drink from that bar. And I'm not sure what was that you were
He's
raised.
Claiming you're shorter than that.
She is in the
No,
morning.
I am-
In the morning, you are.
I am literally 5'2", I swear. Anyway, but I couldn't serve a drink from the bar in the main lobby because I literally couldn't reach across it. I'm too short. It's not comfortable. It's not the best setup. We have a lot of work to do there. We're doing that work. We're making sure our systems can accommodate the bartender's work faster, that it's cleaner, that it's easier to use, that our patrons have options in terms of paying. We take cash, we take cards. That's a change. That's a change. It came before Patrick and I joined the team, but we're working to evolve that Warner experience. Like I said earlier, we have a terrific group of front of house volunteer and bartender staff who they make it happen every single performance. We could not do what we do without the work they do. They load you into the theater. They make sure you have access to what you need. And so the work we continue to do there is to improve it. We want to define the Warner experience as one that Carly can come, get her beverage, get to her seat, and enjoy the show without those hiccups. So we're working on that. I'm trying to think if there's any piece of that question that I didn't address. We did the long lines. Oh, vaccines. If the government mandates we have to ask for them, we will, but that's not where we are, so.
Great. That's a very thorough answer. And the thing, it's so interesting. The thing about the theater experience that can't be replicated with all the things that we did during COVID was the communal experience of it. And what you're speaking to is just that amazing communal experience when you walk into a theater and the anticipation before the curtain goes up and you look around and everybody is feeling the same way. It's magical. Mm-hmm. It's really awesome. And then hopefully when it ends, everyone's feeling even more inspired. You know, 95 out of 100 times that generally happens. And there is no replacement for that. And no matter how great the show you're streaming on Netflix might be, it isn't the same. Yeah. So it's a really important question.
I just have to say, a few weeks ago we had Golden Girls here. I don't know if anyone came to see it, but hysterical show. But I was so moved by just hearing the audience. I had to leave a little bit early and just walking out of the building and just listening to the laughter and the shared experience in that audience. It was really, really powerful.
Amazing. All right, Nina P. has a question about concession prices, particularly for children's events, and she is asking also if there's an opportunity, thinking about rentals, to offer reduced pricing for community groups who want to use the Warner spaces.
We have that. We have that. Do you want to talk a little bit about our community pricing for like rentals with community groups, et cetera?
Oh, sure, yeah. So you can certainly reach out. There's contact information on the website. If you're looking to host an event, a private event, we can help you with that. We have nonprofit rates as well. So if you're a nonprofit looking to host a production here or to present a special event, we can provide those rates to you. But yes, we have discounted rates there for those private events.
And those rates, correct me if I'm wrong, are largely designed, especially the nonprofit rate, to cover our hard expenses while enabling a community group to come in, where they might not be able to if it was full rate.
Yeah, so we want to be as generous as possible to our community. We know there's so many incredible organizations, so many people who we want to provide these spaces to, but we also need to take into consideration that we need to make sure that we're covering all of our internal costs and ensuring, again, that we're here for years to come.
So the first part of her question was about concessions pricing, right? So it's interesting. I look at concessions pricing here. It's all about perspective, right? I look at concessions pricing here, and I'm like, that is so good. Because at the Bushnell, a glass of not so great wine is $15. So it's a true story. It's a true story. Do I think we could adjust our pricing, like for children's events, if it's, juice versus whatever? I think, part of the work that Charlie and the team will do is looking at our overall pricing, but concessions is a meaningful part of our income strategy. It's on the budget, it'd be called ancillary income. It's meaningful. It helps. It's like when you go to the movies, your ticket isn't actually what's making it happen there at the movie theater. It's what you buy at the concession stand. That's not exactly true here, but it's not far. So concessions are meaningful. They're a meaningful part of our strategy.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for your insights, Brian. I'm really glad you stayed up here and answered from the board's perspective. I think it's really important to hear that. So we got a lot of questions from the community, some people that are in the room. If folks that are here have additional questions or people that they know might have additional questions, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Email us. Call us. Our business cards are on the table outside. We always want to hear from you. Always. We get better the more we know. We can do better the more we know. I would say to you that 16-year-old Stephanie sitting in Mr. Grove's drama class could never have imagined that I'd be here, sitting here today with a group of people who love theater the way I love theater in an amazing place like this, and that I have an opportunity to make sure it's here for the next Stephanies and Patricks and Brians and Brads and Carlys and Tims and, in the future. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for asking the questions. Thank you for being patient, and offering us some grace as we work through this to ensure that this Warner, your Warner, remains exactly as it needs to be moving forward.
Yeah, I would just say, to echo your sentiments, I want to share some gratitude to the community, really, for allowing us to step in, and the board inviting us in, and the staff and volunteers embracing us as well. We're so grateful for this opportunity, and we hope that we can continue to prove to you that we're here for a reason, that we want to support this organization. We want to ensure that this organization is here for decades to come, and that we can bring a different level and quality of talent and productions here, in addition to what has already been created over the years, these beautiful pieces. But how can we continue to present that to the community and bring new people in long term? So thank you again for being here tonight, and for supporting this organization.
Yeah. So I started on the board in the mid-'90s, and there hasn't been a time that I've served where there wasn't gravity pushing against this place. It was not a time. And I think back on those days, and there were some really big wins, right? I mean, reopening this theater in 2002 was just spectacular, being a part of that. But that gravity is sometimes not in our control. And so we have a choice to make. Do you kind of push back on that and just stay with this? And here I am, 2024, and doing this with brothers and sisters that have the same feeling on the board, and interacting with staff and people like Patrick and Stephanie, and it's all worth it. And to sit in this room on May 18th at our gala and have our best gala ever, right? By tens of thousands of dollars. People care about this place. It motivates me. The gravity gets me down once in a while, but when you have that kind of momentum, that kind of support, that kind of love for this place, I'm in. So,
What a great night. Everybody, a round of applause for Brian, Patrick, and Stephanie. Thank you all for being here and caring so much about this place and the community, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.